Tommy Robinson has lost a High Court bid this morning to challenge his segregation in prison over fears he'd be killed by another inmate. He was moved to a closed wing at Woodhill after intelligence suggested a prisoner serving life there was planning to attack him. His lawyers argued his isolation breaches human rights and is harming his mental health. But the court heard that he enjoys various privileges behind bars and has no arguable claim. Robinson, real name Stephen Yaxley-Lennon, is serving 18 months in prison for breaching a court injunction.
Tommy Robinson's recent experiences at HMP Woodhill have sparked widespread controversy and anger, especially among his supporters, raising significant concerns about the conditions he is enduring. Robinson, a highly polarizing figure often at the center of media attention, has been placed under one of the most stringent and isolating security measures. However, his time in prison has taken a darker turn, with disturbing reports of excessive and degrading treatment from prison staff. His team, which has been vocal about the situation, describes the conditions as not merely tough, but deeply humiliating, which has amplified the outrage surrounding his imprisonment. One of the most troubling aspects of Robinson's treatment is his recent strip search. Despite being held in solitary confinement with no contact with other prisoners, Robinson was subjected to this invasive procedure. His team has called this search unnecessary and degrading, questioning why such a procedure was deemed necessary when he has no access to other inmates and is under constant surveillance. There is no apparent security risk posed by Robinson, as he is completely isolated from other prisoners. However, he was reportedly treated like a high-risk criminal, with guards searching him as though they were looking for contraband or weapons, despite the lack of any credible reason to believe he had access to these things. The frustration surrounding this incident is amplified by the perception that this treatment is more about punishment and humiliation than any legitimate security concern. Robinson's supporters argue that this behavior is unjust, considering his complete isolation from the rest of the prison population. The prison authorities have defended their actions, claiming that Robinson is being treated fairly, but this only serves to fuel further outrage. It raises a critical question. How can it be fair to isolate someone, restrict all forms of communication, and then subject them to degrading and invasive procedures? This situation raises broader questions about the justice and accountability within the prison system, particularly in high-security units like HMP Woodhill. If someone as high-profile as Robinson can be subjected to this treatment, it begs the question of how those without public scrutiny or legal support are treated in similar environments. This incident has brought to light the lack of transparency in how prisoners are treated, casting doubt on whether the prison system truly adheres to principles of fairness and justice. The treatment of Tommy Robinson at HMP Woodhill has sparked significant outrage and concern, particularly due to the harsh security measures imposed on him during his incarceration. Held in solitary confinement within a segregated unit, Robinson's imprisonment has been marked by increasingly severe restrictions that raise doubts about their necessity. These procedures have raised serious questions, not only about his specific case, but also about the broader treatment of high-profile prisoners in the UK's penal system. One of the most striking aspects of Robinson's confinement is the stringent protocol imposed on visitors. Anyone wishing to see him must first provide an extensive set of personal details, including their name, address, date of birth, and email address, before undergoing a thorough security check. This process mirrors the type of security typically seen at international airports. Visitors are required to be fingerprinted, photographed, undergo physical pat-downs, and have their belongings scrutinized. Additionally, sniffer dogs are used to detect any contraband. While such rigorous measures may be common for high-risk individuals, it is important to note that Robinson is isolated from other prisoners, making the need for these extreme security steps highly questionable. Despite these already stringent security measures, Robinson was still subjected to a full strip search, a procedure that his legal team has described as humiliating and unnecessary. Given that he is confined to a solitary unit, completely isolated from other inmates, the search seems excessive. Robinson was reportedly made to strip naked and squat in front of prison staff, an act that is typically reserved for prisoners with a violent criminal background or a history of smuggling contraband. His legal team has strongly objected to this procedure, arguing that such a search is not only degrading, but entirely unjustified, especially considering the highly monitored and isolated nature of his confinement. The prison authorities have defended the search by stating that it was conducted for security purposes. However, This explanation has failed to satisfy many of Robinson's supporters, who see this treatment as a form of punishment rather than a security measure. They argue that it is an unnecessary level of humiliation directed at a man who is already in complete isolation. This treatment, according to Robinson's legal team and supporters, is not about ensuring safety, it is about degrading him for political reasons. This incident has also sparked concerns about the potential implications for other prisoners, particularly those who, like Robinson, are politically controversial figures. If individuals in solitary confinement under constant surveillance can be subjected to such extreme measures, what happens to those who do not have the same public attention or legal representation? This raises broader questions about fairness, transparency, and the treatment of prisoners within the UK's penal system. It also underscores the need for a serious conversation about human rights and dignity in prisons, especially when dealing with politically sensitive figures like Tommy Robinson. The treatment of Tommy Robinson at HMP Woodhill has sparked significant debate, raising serious concerns about the level of transparency and accountability within the UK's prison system. Robinson, who is being held in complete isolation without contact with other inmates, has been subjected to invasive procedures, particularly a strip search, that many believe go beyond what is necessary for ensuring his security. His case has brought to light broader questions about the treatment of high-profile prisoners, as well as the potential for abuse of power in the penal system. Despite Robinson being isolated, under tight surveillance, and having no access to other prisoners, the prison staff have carried out procedures that appear excessive and degrading. His supporters argue that these measures are not just about ensuring safety, but are instead a deliberate attempt to humiliate him. For many, these actions seem less like security protocols and more like a means of breaking him mentally and physically. Robinson's legal team has labeled the treatment as unnecessary and unjustified, particularly given that he is in solitary confinement, which already limits his ability to interact with others or access contraband. The nature of Robinson's treatment raises larger questions about how politically controversial prisoners are treated in the UK. His case seems to highlight a pattern where individuals who hold views that oppose the establishment or attract media attention are subjected to harsher treatment. This raises the troubling issue of whether the penal system is being used as a tool to punish people for their political beliefs. The prison authorities justified the invasive measures by claiming they are necessary for Robinson's safety and in line with standard procedures. However, many are questioning the validity of these justifications. Given Robinson's isolated status and the complete control authorities have over his environment, it is difficult to understand how such extreme measures are warranted. The idea that these actions are meant for Robinson's safety becomes less convincing when the focus seems to be on humiliating him rather than protecting him. This treatment is not an isolated issue. It points to a broader concern about the treatment of politically sensitive figures and the general conditions within the prison system, particularly for those in solitary confinement or segregation. Prisoners who do not have the same level of public attention or legal support may be subjected to similar degrading conditions without any avenue for justice. This lack of oversight is especially concerning for those whose cases do not attract the same scrutiny as Robinson's. The outrage surrounding his treatment has underscored the need for greater transparency in the prison system. If someone like Robinson, who is under constant surveillance and isolated from others, can be subjected to such invasive measures, it raises significant questions about the treatment of all prisoners. Prisoners without the means or platform to bring attention to their circumstances may suffer the same or worse conditions without anyone noticing. Robinson's case serves as a powerful reminder of the need for accountability within the prison system. It highlights the importance of ensuring that all individuals, regardless of their political views or public standing, are treated with dignity and respect, and that the system remains fair and just for everyone. The wider implications of this case call for reform in the way politically controversial figures are treated, and how the penal system can be made more transparent and accountable. The treatment of Tommy Robinson at HMP Woodhill has ignited significant controversy, raising important questions about the integrity and transparency of the UK's prison system, especially when it comes to high-profile detainees. Robinson's supporters and legal team have expressed deep concern over the extreme security protocols and invasive procedures he has been subjected to, many of which appear excessive given the nature of his confinement. Robinson has been placed in solitary confinement, completely isolated from other prisoners, and subjected to harsh treatment, including strip searches and intrusive cell inspections. According to his team, These actions seem to go beyond security measures, appearing more aimed at breaking his spirit and humiliating him, rather than ensuring safety within the facility. One of the most troubling aspects of this situation is the lack of a clear justification for these punitive measures. Robinson is held in total isolation with no contact with other inmates, so there is no risk he poses to either the prison staff or the general public. Despite this, the prison authorities have continued to impose strict and dehumanizing measures on him. This raises serious concerns that the prison system is being misused as a tool for political retribution, with Robinson being targeted not for his actions but for his outspoken views. His case brings up difficult questions about the use of prison power against individuals whose political beliefs conflict with the establishment. The rationale behind Robinson's treatment has not been adequately explained, and many critics argue that these actions are being taken to punish him for his political stance. While Robinson remains isolated and under heavy surveillance, the continued use of such extreme measures begs the question of why such invasive procedures are deemed necessary. His legal team and supporters believe that the prison authorities are attempting to make an example out of him, to intimidate anyone who might share his controversial viewpoints. Equally concerning is the apparent lack of accountability within the prison system. Authorities maintain that Robinson's treatment is in line with routine procedures, but many see this as a cover-up for what seems like politically motivated punishment. His supporters argue that the system is being manipulated to target political dissidents, sending a chilling message to others who might challenge the mainstream narrative. Robinson's case also highlights a wider issue within the prison system, where individuals who lack a public platform to raise awareness of their conditions are subjected to similar or even harsher treatment. If someone as high profile as Robinson can be treated this way, how many other prisoners are enduring similar conditions without anyone to advocate for them? This troubling scenario underscores the need for greater transparency and accountability within the prison system. Robinson's case should serve as a wake-up call to ensure that all prisoners are treated with fairness and dignity, regardless of their political views or public visibility. There is a growing call for reforms to the system, demanding that it upholds human rights and ensures just treatment for every individual behind bars, regardless of their political or social standing. The growing dissatisfaction among the public regarding the UK spending priorities has sparked significant backlash, with many citizens expressing frustration over what they perceive as wasteful, taxpayer-funded projects. This discontent has intensified as recent reports have exposed the allocation of substantial sums to foreign aid and non-essential international programs, while domestic issues like the cost of living crisis and underfunded public services continue to escalate. The allocation of millions of pounds to foreign projects has caused a sharp contrast to the essential services being slashed within the UK, adding fuel to the fire of public anger. One of the most contentious examples has been the £1,500,000 spent on electric vehicles for Albanian prisons. Many British taxpayers are outraged, questioning the rationale behind such a costly initiative, while there is a dire need for funding at home, particularly to support vulnerable communities. Similarly, the £575,000 allocated for gender mainstreaming programs within the Jordanian Armed Forces has sparked public disbelief, especially when millions in the UK are grappling with stagnating wages and rising living costs. These projects are increasingly seen as detached from the pressing realities faced by ordinary Britons, where essential public services are struggling and welfare support is being curtailed. With austerity measures deeply affecting vulnerable groups in the UK, such as the reduction of welfare benefits and the freezing of universal credit, many are questioning why the government is so willing to spend vast sums abroad while neglecting the needs of its own citizens. The public's frustration has been compounded by the growing sense of injustice, with many asking how these foreign expenditures can be justified when vital services at home are being slashed. Critics argue that while international aid and cooperation are essential, the UK government should prioritise addressing the needs of its citizens before committing taxpayer money to overseas initiatives. The idea that millions are being spent on foreign projects while public services and domestic needs go unfunded is triggering heated debates, with many questioning the government's priorities. Additionally, the lack of transparency surrounding these projects has fueled suspicions that the government is more focused on international relationships and fulfilling political agendas than on addressing the immediate concerns of the UK populace. This growing dissatisfaction is reflected in the increasing popularity of alternative political options, such as Reform UK, which has positioned itself as a voice for those frustrated with the established political system. Reform UK's appeal is particularly strong among voters who feel abandoned by traditional parties and want a government that focuses on the well-being of the British people above all else. As public criticism mounts, the government now faces a difficult challenge in justifying its spending priorities. The question remains, will it continue to defend these foreign expenditures, or will the increasing pressure from voters force a rethinking of its policies? The growing demand for change signals that the government will have to address these concerns and consider a new direction that puts the needs of the UK's citizens first. The increasing frustration among British taxpayers has been amplified by the stark contrast between government spending on international aid and the urgent needs at home. Amid rising living costs, stagnant wages, and underfunded public services, many Britons are questioning the allocation of their money to overseas projects that seem unnecessary. A prime example is the £200,000 sterling study on the lived experiences of the Gypsy community in England and Wales, which critics argue is a misplaced priority when many working families struggle to make ends meet. Additionally, a £25,000 sterling renovation of a tennis court at the British Embassy in Kuwait has drawn outrage, especially given the embassy's existing lavish facilities. While millions in the UK face financial hardship, these expenditures are seen as tone-deaf to the challenges facing the majority of the population. As the cost of living crisis worsens, such spending is increasingly viewed as wasteful. With cuts to welfare benefits and underfunded public services, many are questioning why such projects are being funded at all. This discontent is fueling the rise of alternative political forces like Reform UK, which resonates with those frustrated by the status quo. The growing public anger signals that the government will need to rethink its priorities or risk further alienation of the electorate. See you again.